Greetings, brothers and sisters. I made a video yesterday on the Queen. It was a CNN presentation, something that they put together about her inauguration or whatever it was, when she had the rituals to make her into the leader of the whatever royal cult that she has, right? And CNN copyrighted it like all last night. I kept on taking scenes out and editing things out, um, and I must have put it up 4 or 5 times, and they kept on finding more things to copyright. And so hopefully it's going to be this time that I'll be able to upload it today. That's why I didn't get a video up yesterday. Um, so I thought I'd add a few things to it because there's some news about the royal family here in the beginning, but the video is about the cult that Queen has created, the royal family has created there in England. But Kate Middleton attempts to contain Prince Louis as he taunts her with faces. Prince Louis is my favorite royal. I'll show you why here. So here he is, right? There's the well-behaved one next to William. He gets that one. There's the forgotten middle child, right? And here's Prince Louis, and so he's doing stuff, and she's like takes his hand away, and she's like, oh, and he's doing stuff, and he's mad, he's upset, and boom, he put shut up, bitch. Shut up, you basic. And then he's like, boom. He shouted at her like, boom. He gave her this one. This is a classic. This is like before my time. This is Little Rascal stuff he's pulling out here. Boom. So yeah, it gives it to her again, right? The old Little Rascal move there. She's like trying to calm him down, and at this point you lost. Like, nobody would even know. You're the one who's drawing attention to him. Now he's pouting. He's bringing out all the stops, right? Is wreck that M&F and Jubilee, bring it back to reality. You don't care about it, and there it goes, boom. Yeah, no. He's not going to be king, so why'd matter? Why do you have to sit through all this stuff? This guy's the future king here. All the best moments from the Queen's Platinum Jubilee extravaganza, and there they are. There's his faces. This guy was the star, Prince Louis. He rocked it. There he is again, Prince Louis. Who's this ancient decrepit M&F'er here? You're the star, bro. You do your thing. There they are. He's up now because he's got cupcakes, right? He's like, he's got cupcakes. There they are. Those two guys, right? It's got a little, looks a little bit like that comedian Louis Anderson. And there she is with Paddington Bear for some reason. And geez, this guy's never going to be king. Look how old he is. Look at how old Charles is. He's going to get like 10 minutes as king. There's the hats. That's somebody. Oh, you don't know who he is. Trying to get in there with his hat. This guy's giving him the evil eye, right? Yeah. She's smiling. You can't contain this guy. Prince Louis is doing his own thing. The one thing I want to say, too, is that I discussed the cult that the Queen belongs in, and there's a couple of scandals that if you saw the show The Crown that are documented in The Crown as well. Let's make this bigger here. And, the Queen will always choose the cult and she'll do anything to protect the crown, right? She'll do anything to protect the royal brand. And so when you're listening to that, when my wife and I watched The Crown, we were like, oh, she would totally whack Diana, Princess Diana, over her doing any damage to the crown. Like it's just there, or her people would, and she would just turn a blind eye to it, right? Her handlers would, because they'll do anything to protect the crown because it's it's this huge cult and it's worth lots of money. So that's just something to think about as I go through the ritualistic anointing of the queen. So here's the video. Hopefully I've worked out all the copyright issues. Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I was working on my video, my Journey series video this morning. And I've been working on it a few days. I thought I'd get it done today, but my wife and I planted a bunch of trees, and I built a pad for just all this stuff. Like I did probably about 5 hours of work outside, which was great, but I'm pretty spent. So luckily last night I turned on CNN for a brief moment. I'm not sure what happened. Sometimes, my wife and I are outside and then she's finishing up something, so I'll come in and I'll watch a little bit of news before we watch something together, or I'll watch sports or something. I think it was right before dinner. And I think I was waiting for my wife, and I turned on CNN, and they were doing this thing on the royal inauguration anointing of Queen Elizabeth, right, because of this 70-year platinum anniversary celebration. And when I show you the spot that I tuned into, I went back and and this is one of the wonderful things about the level of technology we have now, right? So I go in, I'm watching on my TV, and I go to my room where I have on my computer, I have YouTube TV. And so I go to that and I record this segment using, that app, which is great. And I have it set on CNN because that's where I get, the most, but I also record various shows. So oftentimes if I see something on the news, almost every time I turn on the news, I could make a video about what I'm watching. So I backed it up a little bit because there was probably some other things that were worth talking about. I haven't seen it yet, but I'll let you know when we get to the spot. And it's something that I've talked about for a while. The Queen thinking that she's the divine representative of God, right? God's representative on earth. That's what the monarch, the Queen or King of England, are told and think about themselves, right? But let's start here.
Hear this roar, and then slowly round the corner came this golden coach. It was like a sort of Walt Disney film, absolutely extraordinary. And there we saw the Queen for the first time. Her dress was so beautiful. The train had little...
So look at the opulence and all these soldiers are at the beck and call. All these servants, right, are being paid by the taxpayers, right? Like all these, there's lots of staff members. There's people who take care of the horses. There's the golden carriage. There's the castles, all the upkeep. Just the extravagance for what, right? For some person who, because of their bloodline, is supposed to rule this country, right? Even after they have their own so-called democratically elected government, right? My mom and dad, I don't know, maybe I was in high school or a little bit younger than that, I'm not sure. I think we went to Newport, Rhode Island, where they had all these old mansions, like these really wealthy, back when this was extravagant wealth, right? And you could tour these mansions. I think it was Newport, I don't know where it was, right? Not important. But we went in and we must have went into like 7 of these like old moneyed mansions, right? And, my mom was like, oh, this is a sin. Like this kind of wealth, she was Catholic and that's the way that she interpreted it. But that kind of extravagant wealth and just, all that goes into the upkeep and the size of these houses, right? Like you just can't even imagine. And one was more, gaudy and than the last one. And, it's unnecessary. It's like a disease, right? They're hoarders. These people who have $1 trillion stored away, hundreds of billions of dollars, or even $1 billion stored away. It's hoarding, right? It should be considered a psychological aberration. You don't need that much, right? Yeah, you can have maybe some millions 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, yeah, something like that. If as long as you're spending it and, whatever. I mean, I guess in some ways you could be a billionaire if you're, not living in that way, right? If you're putting the money back into the economy, I don't even know. Like, I don't know what the cutoff is, but it's definitely, this is way beyond that, right? The British royal family.
All the peers and the peeresses were all dressed up in their ermine. It was like a medieval tapestry.
If you think about all the movements, the civil rights movement, all the various movements, the LGBTQ movements, the social justice movements, all the liberal movements, right? All the movements where people are, the oppressed are having a voice, and the marginalized groups, and, all the talk about poverty, all of it, right? So the Queen was made, she was inaugurated in 1952. That's 70 years ago. If this is her 70th anniversary, then 1952. So World War II was just wrapping up, right? And then we had the Vietnam War, we had the hippie movement. I mean, all these things have happened. I mean, this is before I was born. Actually, it was 1953. So it was 11 years before I was born. And I've seen a lot of things happen, go down in my lifetime. And a lot of movement in terms of, understanding the nature of oppression and abuse, right? And look at this gaudy, I mean, we really can't even, I don't know if there's a word to describe how unbelievably selfish and, over the top. I mean, you don't need something like this, right? Like all the money, all the corruption, all the wars, all the oppression, all the colonization. And so if you think about all these liberal movements and these, social justice warriors, if you want to start someplace, I said this before, start with the Queen. All you liberals, all you people who are, against oppression and the historical abuse of people of color and all these other things, it started with the Queen, right? And they're still doing this. They're still running their game. She still has all these Commonwealth countries paying dues and, taxes to the monarchy. I mean, it's all this ways that they're scamming and oppressing all these people in England and throughout the world. She owns more real estate than any other person. I mean, it's just obscene. And you're out there, going after little know-nothings, right? Fighting little battles, local battles. But this is where it started. Colonization. If you want to look at colonization, this idea of critical race theory. If you want to start somewhere, start with the Queen, right? Start with this gaudy, unnecessary, totally unnecessary, over-the-top, resource-sucking family, right?
She goes now to the altar to confirm before God the promises which she has made.
The coronation is a very ancient religious ceremony, and at the heart of it there is this sacred rite of the anointing of the monarch by the Archbishop of Canterbury.
So the part that I tuned into is coming up right pretty soon here. But it's the religious aspect of this, the coronation, right? They're swearing in the Queen. It's being done in Westminster Abbey. It's, it's a big gaudy church and done by the Archbishop, whatever his name, of Canterbury, right? And so, like, you can see all the religious symbolism, and it's cult-like, right? This is saying that based in her bloodline, based in the, the British, the House of Windsor, the British royal family, right? These descendants of Dracula, like cannibals and these robber barons and thugs, that somehow God has anointed them the rulers of the world. I mean, that's what this is, saying that God is endorsing them as the rulers of the world.
It is the moment of the anointing, a moment so old, history can scarcely go deep enough to contain it.
The anointing means so much to the Queen because she truly believes that she has divine sanction for her power, that she was chosen by God.
So this is the part I turned on the TV and this is what I heard, right? Just to get a sense, because I've covered this and talked about this so much to do with the orb and the scepter, and hopefully they will talk about that here. I don't know. I didn't. As soon as I heard that, I went and said, all right, I'm going to go record this. And I didn't watch the rest of it, right? But this idea that she's God's representative on earth and anointed by God, and the sacred anointing that, they cover it up so no one can see it, right? Like something's entering in her, like some demonic spirit to rule over the world.
The anointing with the holy oil, it's a symbol, really, which I think she felt changed her from being an ordinary person into being a queen.
So I know that the oil isn't holy, and I know that the British royal family has done some ungodly things, lots of them. And this whole idea about royalty, I've talked about how it's the most racist thing because it's based in bloodlines that they're somehow superior and born to rule, and you're a subject of theirs, you're subjugated, you're a servant, you're a slave to them based in their genetic makeup, right? And, this oil isn't holy. And so I don't know what the experience is that she's going through. If it's psychological, it's a placebo, or there's something else going on here. But that oil ain't holy, right? She's not being blessed by God. This isn't some holy oil. They have done some, the British royal family, more than any other family, at least, the public ones that we know about, have been responsible for more abuse and more suffering and more exploitation of people and hedonism and materialistic pursuits. They're the worst, and people aspire to be like them, right? There's, people in America who look at her as their queen. It's completely effed up. When America, did everything in its power, the early Americans, the founding fathers, of freeing themselves from this evil family, right? And their, oppressive rule. All hail the queen, right? This is a cult. It's a freaking cult. She's holding a couple of scepters there. They're going to roll out the orb. So there's the orb and scepter. It'll be interesting if they talk about this, because the orb and the scepter represent that the queen's is God's representative on earth, right? They're a symbol that she has been chosen by God to rule the world. God's chosen representative. That she is a spiritual being, right? That she transcends what people consider royal family or politicians, and she's been anointed by God and is given divine providence over humanity. This is the manifest destiny stuff, right? That she's really the head of the church in England, and she's really the spiritual leader of the world. That's what they believe, and that's what the orb and the scepter represent. Like, there was these various articles I found about it, and I wonder if they're hiding that now, right? Like, they're not making that public because it isn't going to wash when you hear that. Like, now they're pretending she's just some figurehead and she doesn't have any real power, and they're all these countries have their own governments, and Britain has its own government. But make no mistake about this, it isn't just about her being the queen. It's being God's representative, which is effed up. Like, that is just insane, and that means that she's in charge of some cult, and all these dopey Hollywood celebrities and politicians and Americans and people all around the world want to be part of that cult, right?
27 million people watch this ceremony.
An incident takes place that jeopardizes Elizabeth's reign before it's hardly begun.
The Queen's sister, Princess Margaret, was seen brushing a bit of fluff off the uniform of a household official, senior household official.
So we know about this if you watch The Crown. She is having an affair. They figure it out, right? And there is her uncle, the Queen's uncle, who married Wallis Simpson, who's an American, and it was divorced, right? And how they frown on divorce. And none of those things are really important to what I'm covering here. But then they say this.
I think we have to remember that the Queen is not only a devout Christian, but she's also the head of the Church of England.
So think about how messed up that is, right? Because spirituality, one's pursuit of divinity, one's, moving closer to God. You can look at somebody's divine pursuit, people who are saints, people who are spiritual beings, people who are spiritual masters, people who are whatever you want to call them, is about one's proximity to the divine. That's one way to look at it. Going inside yourself and connecting to God within. And, deepening your internal journey. Going deeper on your soul's path and getting closer to God. Or just loving God more. I mean, these are all things that make a spiritual life. And it isn't something that you can confer some, like some fake Wizard of Oz, like some, heart for the Tin Man, a certificate of education for the Scarecrow, and, a badge of honor or courage for the Lion, right? They're just imaginary. Like, you can just write out a certificate. Like I said, my brother and I were walking by a martial arts studio, and they had all these trophies, right? And my brother said, when you open a martial arts studio, the first thing you do is go to Mr. Trophy. Like, you can just go get a trophy. You can just go, fill your house with trophies, right? And show off all your trophies, and you didn't win any of them. And so you can, make certificates up, and you can claim things. But in the realm of divinity, you are wherever you are. There's no BS in your spiritual approach to God. And so it's not something that is passed along a genetic bloodline. They aren't more divine or more spiritual than other people just because they were born into this family, a family of vampires. I mean, Count Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, was their ancestor. They had cannibals. I mean, they admitted to having cannibals. The Queen said that the royal family used to eat people for health benefits, but they stopped 300 years ago. But up until 300 years, they were people eaters, right? They weren't spiritual people. And even if they were, it's not something you pass on. If you're a saint, doesn't mean your kids are going to be saints. And often it's just the opposite. In the Heartfulness meditation, there was, 4 masters of the system. And Lalaji had children, and I don't know much about his children, but his successor was Babaji, someone he wasn't related to. And then Babaji had 5 children. One of them committed suicide. The others sued Master Charji, the representative. I mean, they were just known as like horrible people. They were, one of them was always beating his wife and kids. I mean, they were, I don't know all that much about them. I just know that they weren't great people, right? And just because Babaji was this divine being doesn't mean his kids were great. It doesn't work that way. And Master Charji had 1 son, and, he's a spiritual person, but he's a little bit stubborn and hard-headed. I like him where, I always talk to him when I see him, whenever I see him. He's somebody who, I respect. He's a good practitioner of the Heartfulness system, but he wasn't the person that could succeed his father, right? Because it doesn't work that way. And so this idea that the Queen is head of the church, like, how effed up is that? Like, this is, this is a cult. It's beyond what people think about in terms of being some fantasy, they're talking about it being like a Disney film early on. And this idea of royalty and all the romance and all the things that, marrying a prince and all these things that are a part of all these children growing up with these fantasies. And now it's just a figurehead, and it's, it's like an old age thing that's nice and romantic, and it brings in tourists, and people want to see Buckingham Palace, and they want to participate in royal activities. It brings in money for the government in England, and they say all these things. No, this is a cult, MNFers, right? This is a cult of the royal, the royal family is a cult and the queen is its leader. So the rest of the segment talked about how the queen banished her sister's divorcee love interest for a couple of years because he was in the military, and they ended up waiting and wanting to be married anyway. If you saw The Crown, they covered this, and she promised her sister that she wouldn't interfere, but eventually she forbade her sister from marrying, even though the majority of people in England wanted that to happen. They were interested in the romance, and they were on Princess Margaret's side. And then it got into the scandal with her husband, who was going out and partying and doing all these things with a couple of, like a fraternal group of pals who were banging women and drinking and gambling. They had some kind of a club, right? Like some of these clubs. And she clipped his nuts, right? Which you saw in The Crown. And so, it's all about saving face. Even though the majority of people in England had moved on, had accepted divorce, were on her sister's side, she had this group of handlers who are controlling, and they're all about image and the past and, all this fake stuff that they do. I mean, you understand how oppressive these families are. Never mind the oppression they inflict on other peoples in other countries, invading them and colonizing them. I mean, you think about all the resources they stole, and, they were the originators of the modern day slavery that is such a big topic today, right? The African slavery, and then their indentured servants, but all that stuff. Like, that's all one level of oppression. But you look at the way these royals live, I've talked about this before. Everything they do is arranged, scripted, and controlled, right? They have their own private little lives, in their castles or whatever it is. But their public persona, and then who they marry and what they do here, what they do there. This is why Prince Charles was so unhappy marrying Diana when he was in love with Camilla Parker Bowles. I mean, all these things, right? They live horrible lives, even though people envy them, and they're completely controlled. And none of that's godly, right? None of that has any divinity in it. It's devoid of divinity. It's devoid of being in a flow. People are, they have their soul's path and their soul's purposes. And, the number of people that you can marry in this world is very limited. People that you can get along with, people that you have a soul connection with. You can have a prearranged, marriage of the soul when your soul is planning your life here. And you have these prearranged people that you can, be with in different levels, people who you have a connection with. And if the royal family and their oppressive nature is thwarting that, think about how they're going against your divine, your divine self, your, the divinity within you and your soul's path, and ultimately God. And so there's no divine energy there, right? She's not anointed by God, right? It's an oppressive, abusive, twisted, crazy-ass royalty cult, right? And they just get everyone else locked into it. They get everyone else, they've conned all these people to be a part of it. And you look at it just on the face of it, all the, gaudy royal garb and all the, extravagant ritualistic behaviors and all of it. It's not fun. It's not enjoyable. Like, why are you still doing this? Like, it's time to move on, right? And they're not. Like, people are still obsessed with the queen and they're still doing this stuff. Like, if you don't take it away from them, they're not going to give it up, right? It's something that has to be taken. They should just get rid of. I mean, everybody should see this, but they're not. Any sort of sense of royalty, any sense of bloodlines, any sense of genetic rulership, any sense of genetic spiritual leadership, this idea of a chosen one, and you have to work for it, right? You have to earn it. This idea of a system that rewards for merit and not nepotism, not your family lineage. And in most cases, you have a great person, and I don't mean great that they're a good person. I mean they're great, like they conquered, they were some great warrior who conquered all these countries and brought all these, kingdoms together. There's all these mini kingdoms and all these dukes, all these little minor kingdoms in Europe and England and these places. And you had these great leaders who brought all that together. They were either great in the battlefield or great in, politics and negotiation or whatever it might be, right? And you have these great leaders who, and might be the founding fathers, or might be a great athlete or a great musician, right? It might be any number of levels of greatness and artistry. And very seldom are their kids good at anything, and they're never going to be as good as their parents. And very seldom will they ascend above and beyond what their parents did. Like once in a while you see that, right? You see, great athletes who have children who are great athletes, but usually the kids want no part of their father's business. They don't want part of their family business, right? They have to be brought along into it. Most times kids, especially in America, rebel, but this is kind of a worldwide phenomenon, and they want to do their own thing. They want to make their own mark. Quite often you see this probably with your own kids. They're not into what you're into, right? They might have been when they were little kids, but they get older and they want to do their own thing. And so even if that's not the case, when you have really rich men, right, the kids are usually like spoiled, bratty, entitled, no thirst, no hunger, no drive. They don't have a dog in them, right? They're not, way to grind it out and go out there and battle to succeed. They've grown up with too much entitlement, too much privilege. They don't have the thirst and hunger that their parents have, right? And so, genetic lines aren't a good idea, because each generation is influenced by the previous generation. And real successful people don't have real successful kids most times. There's occasionally an anomaly. But people who are really successful in one field or another don't have kids with that level of ambition and whatever it is. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Maybe the kids are better than them. Maybe the kids are, less driven, less OCD, less, competitive. I mean, who knows what it is. And they're more spiritual and they're more refined. They have the influence and the money. Maybe they don't want to be famous because they see what it does to their parents. Who knows what it is. And so all these ideas of genetic lines are stupid. They're not born to lead. Genetics is a part of everything, but you might have a royal family where the firstborn's a total like dope, right? And the only good leader is a woman, right? And they don't want to give it to her. So you never know what's going to happen. Like again, it's just if you're leaving it all up to genetics, right? Okay, this family is going to be the most powerful family in the world for the next 20,000 years, and they're also going to be spiritual giants and in charge of one of the major religions, right? And so, it's obscene, right? It doesn't work. We all know it doesn't work. It's not backed by science. It's not backed by theocracy, by any sort of religious tradition and religious teachings. It's not backed by anything, right? It's just something a powerful family made up. They claim something, that their genetics were anointed by God. They're cannibalistic, and Dracula having genetics was anointed by God. Look at Jojo Magoo and his son Hunter Biden. Well, what if Hunter was your next president, right? You think Jojo's bad? Like, wait till you get that crackhead stripper baby, stripper banging, crackhead baby creating, laptop dropping in the tub, MNFer, which you have him as president. Anyways, only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Rovato, definitely important for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.